Okay, and we're live not only on Mute the Media, but the Trickle Up, because we like to help out fellow independent media channels. And tonight we're going to be talking with Sass, who is running in District 35 in Texas, a brand new district. So Sass, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. I am Sass. I am running for U.S. House of Representatives down here in Austin, Texas. Texas 35 is the district. So what happened was before 2020, Texas had 36 U.S. congressional districts and then picked up 2 new districts after the census. So Texas 37, Texas 38. I knew that just based on population distribution and a variety of technical factors, that one of those districts was going to end up near where I lived. And my goal was, from the beginning, was to run in a district with no incumbent. So I actually had a chance of winning. So the incumbent in Texas 35 has now decided to run in the new Texas 37. So he's switching districts. And so Texas 37 now is basically like the entire west half of Austin. And so that means I'm running in Texas 35. Because again, I don't want to run against an incumbent that I have no chance of beating, because I'm not going to get anywhere with that. So that's exactly what's happening. The lines have been adjusted. So if you do happen to live in the area, be sure to go to my website, voteforsass.com. And just on that first page, you can scroll down and you'll see the map with the old lines and the new lines. And you can always DM me if you're not sure, need more resources or links to see if you're like right on the border or whatever. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just running to empower every individual to become the best version of themselves.
And tell me about your district. I know it's like brand new and you have to, but like if you're going to represent it, you must know a little bit about the data.
Yeah. So it stretches from, it's effectively like the east half of Austin, and then it thins out and stretches all the way down I-35 through San Marcos and New Braunfels, down into like part of like the center bit of San Antonio. So it's pretty gerrymandered, but that's what we were expecting. And that's what it did before, but it was just like shaped a little bit differently. The voter base is 51% Hispanic. I do know some Spanish, but it might be worth it for me to brush up a little bit. My website is translated into Spanish, but it's a Google Translate. I want to get it professionally translated. And it votes in the last, from 2016 to 2020, it has voted 70% Democrat. And so I am going to run as a Democrat. And I have changed my registration with the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission. And so I will be registering for the ballot within about a month here. And what that means too is that this election, my race at least, is going to be decided in the primary, not in the general. And in Texas, the way we do it is we always have a primary where 2 candidates then go on to a runoff race, a top 2 runoff, and then one of them from the party then goes on to the general election. So we have a primary on March 1st, and then we have a runoff on May 7th. So those are the 2 that really, really matter for my race, for sure. And then there's another point I wanted to make about that. Oh, yeah. So we have open primaries, not the open primaries you may have been hearing about with Andrew Yang. They kind of co-opted the term. What that means is that you don't need to be registered in Texas. You don't need to be registered with a particular party to vote in their primary. It just you can only vote in one partisan primary at a time, or in a given election cycle. But so if you are a Republican in Texas 35, you're not going to have any chance in the general. You're actually better off voting in the Democrat primary if you really care about this U.S. House race. And so I would encourage you to vote in the Democrat primary and the Democrat runoff to help push forward the candidates that you want among who is running. And I hope that I can get your vote. I am very focused on creating solutions that include all people. And when I say all, I mean all. I'm not concerned with your political identity or anything. I really do believe that we can bring everybody together. And we'll be talking about my stances on things tonight and really what the highest priority items are. So even if we disagree on some of my policy stances, that's my B tier stuff. It's my platform. That's where my real energy is going, and I think that is far more nonpartisan and much more universal, more universally appealing, I should say. So yeah, I'm super excited to get into it tonight and talk about all sorts of fun stuff. But that's effectively where we're at with that right now.
Now, do you mind me asking what you changed from when you registered to be a Democrat? I'm assuming it's independent, but just for like the sake of like, in case there's a big plot twist, was it Republican?
No, so originally when I registered, I knew that I wasn't going to declare my party affiliation until I had more information. That was always the plan because I'm running to win. And so I had, with the FEC, I actually put other originally. I could have picked independent. It really didn't matter at the end of the day. So it was originally I put other with the FEC, but that was just kind of a formality more than anything else. I had been very consistent for 11 months that I was running to win, and I was going to include all people, and I was going to make a strategic decision in that regard, whatever it ended up being, whatever ended up making the most sense.
Yeah, that's smart. I always advocate that like people, it's not about like what you identify as, it's like what your district or your state identifies as. So like I'm just like whatever party will favor you, just run as that and infiltrate that party with your progressive views, because I think the kind of people we need in office are not your traditional Democrats and not your traditional Republicans anymore. So
for sure. Yeah. The establishment is not helpful for a lot of people. Definitely.
Yeah. And I've seen your platform. It is extensive and very progressive. And again, if you go to voteforsass.com, you guys can you can read more about it. So I just double checked Ballotpedia. There's only 4 people so far running. And I'm like,
did it list Greg Kazar?
It does not. It does not. So it's just not updated.
That one's kind of a big deal. Yeah, I think one of them on there is like not really running. Like they filled some paperwork with the FEC, but they have no presence. Like they haven't actually done anything. That's one of the things people sometimes people are like, congratulations on running for Congress. And I'm like, technically all I needed to do was like fill out an online form, and that was free in order to officially be a candidate. So if Ballotpedia wants to load, that's because it's .org, I think, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And because it's like it's in the description of this video, actually. I linked to it. But
okay. Yeah.
Because it's like a brand new district, you can't even find it listed, and that you have to like search for it. It doesn't, it's just like a weird search results versus like its own page for the 35th.
Whoa, what was that? Okay, apparently Ballotpedia's got a virus or something. That was weird. Okay, well, yeah. So So there's myself. There's David Anderson Jr. He's down in San Antonio, and there's Claudia Zapata. We all know each other. So I've talked to David a couple times. We're actually going to be on the same stream tomorrow with Faye on the Yanking Report Live. I have it wrong on my Twitter post. It says Roundtable, but it's the Yanking Report Live. It's the same acronym, so I got confused. And he also has the Freedom Dividend on his platform. And then Claudia, she actually organized a rally around Medicare for All once, which was super cool. I attended that. So she's up here in Austin. She's on the east side. And but then recently, my city councilor, Greg Kazar, threw his hat in the race. And that's kind of a big deal because he's a good candidate, unfortunately for me. So he has already gotten in while he was in his what's it called? It's like what Pete Buttigieg did before he actually started running. You know what I'm talking about? The exploratory committee on whether or not he should run. And during that time, he got an endorsement from, I think, like every city council member in Austin, every city council member in San Antonio, like previous congressional candidates, like Lloyd. I think he even got an endorsement from Lloyd Doggett, who is technically the incumbent in 35, who's moving to 37. And then when he did launch his campaign, he raised like $40,000 in the first 3 hours or something. Like, and he's I voted for him last year in his council race, and this is his third term. So he doesn't talk, so far as I've seen, he hasn't talked about unconditional basic income. He hasn't talked about voting method reform, which are really, really huge and important to me. I kind of would rather he just stay on the city council and let me go to DC and deal with the nonsense happening on the Capitol, happening in the Capitol. But yeah, that definitely has changed the dynamics of the race for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting that so many, like, you're listing all the people and you're like, and therefore this progressive stuff, and therefore this progressive stuff. I'm like, this is how every race should be. It shouldn't be where there's like the lone progressive and then like a bunch of corporate Democrats. So yeah, this is like going to be an interesting one to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So you just brought up democracy reform, and early on, Carnage asked a question about ranked choice voting. And she's like, are you going to push for ranked choice voting? I'm going to rip this Band-Aid off right now, Carnage. Sass doesn't. Yeah.
Actively pushing against ranked choice instant runoff voting in
but
Austin.
Hear him out. Hear him out.
So Austin recently voted to adopt ranked choice voting for mayoral and city council races. But the problem is it's not compatible with Texas election code. And it's actually been shot down in Austin before in 2001. And we have all the documentation on that. And so the city council was like, yeah, well, there's no precedence for actually implementing it. Like, we can't do this. And so now they're going to court over it. So this was promoted by Austinites for Progressive Reform. And we actually messaged them. We were like, you guys know this isn't compatible. Like, approval voting should actually be compatible. And they were like, we looked at it, but we decided not to go for it because we wanted to go for something that Austinites might be familiar with, and like familiar with in like major quotes. Like, I promise you, people are not as familiar with ranked choice voting as you think they are. You probably aren't. But really what I've since found out is going on is Fair Vote, which is like the main lobby for ranked choice voting in the United States, which has been around since 1993 and led by Rob Ritchie, has so much money that they don't know what to do with it. And so they basically they're basically just like at this point where they're like, they'll just run campaigns anywhere and just fight it in court and see what happens. So their failure rate is actually really, really big. Their campaigns fail all the time and you don't hear about them. What I think has happened is that they effectively made a deal with Austinites for Progressive Reform and said, we will pay for all of the court fees. Like, we will fight this in court for you if you fight for ranked choice voting. And that's probably was like a huge boon for them, was like, okay, cool. Now this is like this thing we don't have to worry about. So that's very unfortunate. But I am actively working on a campaign for approval voting for some lower elections. I believe we'll be able to get that adopted and implemented faster than ranked choice voting will get implemented, and that the people will like it more. But if we want to talk specifically about ranked choice instant runoff voting, before I dive in, because I can kind of go off the rails with it, did you have like a specific question for me, Shai, or I think you brought up something for me before earlier, right?
Well, like, my main thing is like, what is I asked you before, but you've already answered that. I was like, why are they always pushing for ranked choice voting? And you just explained it. It's because of Fair Vote. But because I don't know. I guess
that actually does. That's not the full answer. Like, why that voting method over others? There's more history in that. So,
okay. Is it?
Yeah.
Can I be frank for a second? Is it easier to rig? Is that why they want that one? Is it easier to rig?
No.
Okay.
That's not the reason. That would actually almost be like better, because it would make this easier to fight against. But that's not really the reason, no. So ranked choice instant runoff voting was invented in 1870 by an architect with no mathematical background, who then did zero analysis of it. And then some other dude like picked up on it and was like, I love this, and then just started spreading it. And now it's used in a handful of places around the world. And in all of those places, we have not seen ranked choice instant runoff voting lead to any kind of like significant increase in the number of major parties. We've seen a continuous duopoly stranglehold, and there are places that want to repeal it. We're seeing tensions about that in Australia. It holds up two-party systems, but the thing is, like, voting science has been, unfortunately, gate kept for a very long time. It wasn't until very recently, really like in the last 4 years, to be totally honest, that like there started to be some like actually accessible information that wasn't just mired in like crazy math PhD speak and guarded by a bunch of, and I'm serious about this, aggressive white males who like being very elitist about it and like genuinely believe that that not everybody deserves to vote. Like there are a lot of skeletons in the closet of voting science, which is very unfortunate. But there's also another piece of this too, which is that in 1993, we thought that ranked choice instant runoff voting was better than we now know that it is. And we now have a much better understanding of not only how bad it is, but we also now have better voting methods and better understand why other voting methods are better than we did back then. So in the year 2000, Warren D. Smith, he's another math PhD, came out with started this kind of renaissance in voting science that brought it into the modern age with his Bayesian regret models. So effectively, simulations of elections is like computer simulations, which is the direction that every science field has headed. So this was absolutely in the right realm. Whereas before that, everything was about these like kind of pass-fail criteria. These like either, when it was this very black and white, 100% or 0%, you either like can achieve this like specific thing with this voting method or you can't with this other. But this took a more statistical approach that was able to show like how effective different voting methods were in different situations with different kinds of things going on. And from there, the field has continually advanced on that. Ka-Ping Yi came out with these very colorful diagrams that help us to visually see what different voting methods do with different electorates and different candidates. And that's very helpful for understanding, because you just get that instead of just staring at numbers, you're looking at something visual. And then you had Jamison Quinn with his voter satisfaction efficiency models, which are based off Warren Smith's Bayesian regret, but they're kind of at this next level, this next evolution, running way more simulations, way more voters, and way more in depth and way more variables. And then that's also able to show like strategic incentives as well. And there's actually kind of like a third evolution that's currently in peer review right now that we're hopefully going to start seeing. I don't know when it's going to be ready, but when it is, I'm super excited for it. And we've just seen more people enter the space. We've seen a more diverse group of people enter the space. And we now understand that ranked choice instant runoff voting over time trends towards worse results than our current choose one voting, which is a little bit mind-blowing. Like, it doesn't make intuitive sense. But the reason for that is because ranked choice instant runoff voting doesn't make intuitive sense at its core. And whatever description you've heard of it is probably wrong. Like, it probably doesn't really fully describe it accurately. I have a TikTok series that I made, and I also posted it on YouTube. So if whichever platform you prefer, just going through a ranked choice instant runoff voting election, going through the whole thing, and almost all the other videos you've seen, except the sticky note one, which is also problematic. I have problems with that one. They go through like the first round of instant runoffs, and then they just skip to the results. But like that doesn't demonstrate where the problems can happen. And again, I don't want to ramble too long because I have a lot of problems with this voting method. But the thing to realize is that in each distinct instant runoff round, you as a voter are only able to support a single candidate at a time. So each runoff round is just a choose one voting election. You cannot fix the problems of choose one voting by iterating it over and over again. You're still going to get the same vote splitting effect. and even Fair Vote themselves. And I have the page on this, and I can send you the link right now if you want to pull it up. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. It's just kind of a wall of text. But Fair Vote themselves states that ranked choice instant runoff voting does not help elect third parties or independents. Really, all it does is it mitigates this specific category of the spoiler effect that makes people feel better about their votes, but they have no claims about it actually delivering better results. And I'll add that the way in which it mitigates the spoiler effect is actually undesirable. So what it is you have two major parties, right? Democrats and Republicans in the United States. And so one of the things that right now in our current system that like the Green Party does is they leverage the spoiler effect to get Democrats to shift their stances on important issues. The Libertarians do the same thing to Republicans. And so it's this kind of this threat. It's not a lot of power over the major parties, but it is a little bit. It's something. But under ranked choice instant runoff voting, that vote, because now you can rank the Democrat second or whatever, your vote is just going to transfer. And now all of a sudden that threat is lost. Or if you don't rank the Democrats, what happens is your vote is literally thrown away. It's called ballot exhaustion. It's not counted in the final round when determining who actually wins. Like it's not even used in the denominator of the tally for like the percentages or anything. So for example, New York City Democratic mayoral race, they said Eric Adams got 50.4% of the vote. That's not true. He only got 43% of the vote. Catherine Garcia got 42% of the vote, and 15% of the ballots just weren't counted in that final round. So again, I keep going and going on. I'm gonna stop, but there are a lot of very fundamental problems with this voting method.
Right, and so like I'm gonna really oversimplify things here, and you can just like if there's any disinformation that comes out because I'm either misunderstanding or poorly articulating it, please call me out on it. But so with RCV, you're basically picking like your favorite and your second favorite and your third favorite ice cream flavor, okay? But with something like star voting, you're basically rating how good you like vanilla, how good you think chocolate is, how good you think strawberry is. And when you compare those two methods, you can make an argument that like, yeah, maybe you should be voting for how much you favor something and not just this is my favorite, this is my second favorite. Is that a fair assessment of ranked?
Yeah, and I will simplify it further.
Okay.
So you're talking about the difference between ranking and scoring. So the difference between ranking and rating. Rating and scoring is the same thing. In star voting, you score candidates from 0 up to 5 stars, and we add up the scores. And then the two candidates with the highest score become finalists who then move on to the automatic runoff. So it's automatic. You don't need to vote again. Then what happens in the automatic runoff? Whichever of those two finalists you scored higher on your ballot, they get your one full vote. Whichever finalist gets the most full votes wins. And this produces really astounding results. This was invented in 2014 as kind of the ultimate culmination of modern voting science. It's kind of had its own little renaissance of like hybrid voting methods and how do we balance kind of score and rank systems. One of the things that was kind of discovered was that you can always extract ranks from scores, but not vice versa. Like scores inherently hold more data than ranks. And so because you get more data, you can use better data to deliver better results. And one of the other important things to note here is that under ranked choice instant runoff voting, you're not allowed to rank multiple candidates equally. In every implementation in the United States, they use truncated ballots, so you can't actually rank everybody. The most number of ranks that we've seen was only recently in New York, where it was 5. Before that, it was typically 3. I think there were a couple cases where it was 4. And I don't think we're going to see anything past 6, probably, with that particular method and the way that Fair Vote is pushing it. And so like that also causes problems. But with score voting, or with star voting, you can score candidates independently. And so you can have multiple candidates at 5 stars or 3 stars. You can draw bigger differences between them. You can put them right next to each other. It's more expressive. It's more free the way in which you can vote. And then the data is also, we use all of the data. Ranked choice instant runoff voting does not use all of the data. Star voting uses all of the data, and it uses it in a much better way that delivers better results. And we have a variety of different ways to prove that. And I always encourage people to take a look into the details because it is incredibly robust and it stands on its own for sure.
Right. So in other words, like in ranked choice voting, you're basically like, I can pick my 5 favorite flavors. But in star voting, everyone, you get to say exactly how much you like each flavor that is running. So
Yes.
yeah, I totally get why Sass is for star versus ranked choice voting. And I was just genuinely curious. And I think he answered my question. Like, then why do we push for the other so much? And it's kind of like boomer thinking where you're just like, well, it's been around a long time. So it's like what everyone knows.
Yeah, but you know what else has been around a long time? Choose one voting.
Yeah.
Like just because it's been around a long time, like, right? And the other thing too is like, this is one of the things that I like to talk about that I don't think is talked about enough, which is it's something called precinct summability. So this is a quality of voting methods. Some have it, some don't. And what it means is that you are able to sum the results within just an individual precinct in a nice, like clean, simple, compressed way that each precinct can individually and independently report directly to the media and publicly. And then anybody anywhere can take these publicly reported results and further sum them up and then come up with who the winner should be. This is really great because it keeps our voting decentralized. So it allows for risk limiting audits at the precinct level. So you can have recounts in just individual precincts. Most single winner voting methods satisfy this, but ranked choice instant runoff voting does not. Ranked choice instant runoff voting requires ballots to be centralized to a single location, to be tabulated, and so that's a single point of failure, effectively. And so you lose robustness against scaled election attacks, which is really important in the US because we're a long-standing military and economic superpower. There's a lot of international and foreign interest in our elections. And we've already seen this fail. So in New York City, they centralized everything to a board of elections that has a history of failure. And then what did they do? They mixed in a bunch of test ballots with the real ballots, and it was a big fat mess. It took them weeks to count. I mean, it was a disaster. But if they had other single winner voting methods like star voting, approval voting, or even our current choose one voting, then each precinct can individually report those results to the media. No big deal. And it would have gone much smoother, and it would have felt way more secure for sure. It would have felt way less sketchy, which is like important. Voter integrity and voter trust is incredibly important right now in the US when it comes to elections. And so like I said, there are a lot of problems with this voting method. That's one that I particularly care about as an election security concern and a military superpower. But I don't remember where I was going with this, but yeah, that's it's like an important thing.
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute and I was like on a different tab responding to someone's comment there. So real quick, before we pivot from the democracy reform, someone asked, if they use star voting anywhere? And I Googled it and I don't see them saying that they do.
Yeah, they need to update their endorsements page, which like I literally talked to the executive director about that like 4 days ago. Like it's on their list of things to do. They just staffed up. Like they're charting through stuff. We've just like doubled the number of volunteers for the Equal Vote Coalition in like 2 weeks, thanks to Elena, who is just a superstar volunteer and organizer. But it's so funny because we just responded to like a request from an organization about more information. We put together this whole like PDF. So I actually want to pull that up and just read the director's response. Let me switch accounts here. So it's mostly in Oregon where we're seeing it used. It's currently not used in any governmental general elections. Some parties have used it for their primary, including the Independent Party of Oregon has used it statewide, which of course we assisted with. But let me get a better answer here. I just want to get it right. Okay, so there are a number of active and ongoing campaigns for star voting around the state, around Oregon at the city, county, and statewide levels. Last Thursday, actually, the Portland Charter Review Commission's subcommittee on the form of voting recommended star voting to the larger commission. We are hopeful that the commission's going to refer star voting directly to the 2022 ballot for Portland elections. Star voting should also be on the ballot in both Eugene and Troutdale, Oregon in 2022. And we are very positive about those based on previous campaigns and polling and other things that have happened. And there are several local campaigns around the country that are promising as well. We just saw some interesting things happen in Redondo Beach, where they were supposed to, there was some government official who was supposed to report on both ranked choice voting and star voting, but then they only reported on ranked choice voting. But we had advocates there who were like, hey, you were supposed to do this. And some of the other politicians spoke up. And they're like, okay, we're going to delay this because we need to have a presentation on both. So we're definitely fighting a bit of an uphill battle in some places, but it's worth it. But statewide, Oregon still uses the same old choose one voting that almost every state in the union does. But bills to adopt or authorize star voting at the statewide level have been introduced in Oregon by a Democratic legislator and Utah by a Republican legislator this year. Those campaigns are ongoing. But yeah, so there are a variety of, like I said, the Democratic Party of Oregon has used it to pick presidential delegates. I think the Libertarian Party has used it in some capacity as well. So like we are right on the precipice, and we're going to start seeing this happen, especially in Oregon, but probably in a couple other places as well, because we have some very excited activists. There's a cool campaign kind of starting up in Massachusetts. California is very active, and I'm gathering some Texans. And there's in smaller jurisdictions, star voting may be more viable than approval voting because of like this extra clause in the Texas state election code for larger cities. It's a whole thing. But yeah, so it hasn't been used yet. But you have to remember, star voting was only invented in 2014. There was only an organization advocating it for since 2017. It has taken Fair Vote nearly 30 years to gain any momentum, and they fail about half the time. So, honestly, the amount of momentum we've gained in this period of time is actually, I think, comparatively been pretty fantastic.
Yeah. And so Dylan, who's in our chat, is actually in your district and has a question. Yeah. And I can read it if you're too far away from your monitor, because I can't tell if you can.
No, I can see. I always like to read it out for maybe someone who can't see very well. So with the disconnection of TX-35 being one of the most gerrymandered districts, how would you plan on accurately representing the interests of both Austin and San Antonio? That's a fantastic question, Dylan. Yeah, both cities have a vastly different long-term goal, and national policies would affect both cities differently. What could you do to unite both cities to represent both? Yeah, so this is a really huge part of why I picked Congress. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but I am very passionate about national issues. And like I said before, my priorities are very focused on solutions that include all people. I agree that there are different concerns and different goals in those different cities, there are absolutely ways to address it that I think are more relevant on the local level. But I believe that my approach is going to be applicable to far more than just Austin and San Antonio. When we talk about Congress, we are, except for some rare cases like Alaska and Hawaii, because they're just those are always kind of outliers in some cases. We really do see that the majority of the advocation is not for something specific to that locale, but things that affect the whole country. So when I'm talking about and thinking about my role as a congressperson, I'm thinking about the national level. I do, of course, prioritize my district first. There's kind of a hierarchy. It's district, state, country, world, because U.S. Congress also makes decisions that affect other countries too. So I really do see myself in some capacity potentially representing everybody in the world in some capacity. I take that very seriously. So I'm sorry if that kind of went around your question a little bit, but I think a lot of it just comes down to like my attitude is like, yes, I understand. You know, people come to me with local and state level concerns all the time, and I still try to address those and think about how we can ensure that there are policies in place that would allow municipalities and the state of Texas to execute on the things that it needs to execute, or at least incentivize the changes that are needed. But it's very rare that you see a problem that is isolated to just one community in the country. And like typically, even if we do see something, that's usually indicative of a larger problem that is happening all over the country, but just hasn't been uncovered yet. So I tend to be focused on things that are national and that affect everybody.
And then before we pivot from other stuff on your platform, because we were just talking about democracy reform and like voting reform, what's your stance on things like, do you think if you're incarcerated, you should be able to vote? Do you like, I'm assuming you're for really getting the vote out because you're so passionate about democracy reform.
Yeah. Voting is a right, and that means it cannot be taken away from you. Like that is the most. I did a whole stream on this with somebody who's like spent a lot of time studying this, of like defining what the word right means. And I think like the most base level version of it is something that the state cannot take away from you, or at least is not allowed to take away from you. So if we want to say that voting is a right, then that means that regardless of what anybody does, they should be able to vote. And I actually do take a very strong stance on that. There are a lot of issues I do take a more hybrid stance or more compromise or creative solution that comes from like gathering perspectives from multiple people. But there are a few issues that I do take very strong stances on, and that is one of them that I believe everybody, I mean, like currently 18, I think should be lowered to 16 in the US, but everybody over 18 who lives in America, actually, like I think it should be extended beyond citizenry, but at the bare minimum, citizens should be allowed to vote 100%. So yeah, that is my stance on that issue.
Yeah, I figured that much, and so I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to get that out, because I think that's an underrated, valuable thing to have on your platform.
I think it says a lot about where people's mindset is thinking about others, and it's not to shame anybody who believes otherwise, but I think that if somebody believes that there is somebody who shouldn't be allowed to vote, that is a product of a world that causes damage, undue and unnecessary damage, and kind of almost brainwashes us into believing poorly about others instead of trying to do our best to increase the well-being of others and increase the well-being of people on the planet, and believing in trying to believe in the best of what people can be. And so I try to take that very positive approach. I understand that perspective. There probably was a point in my life where I believed that certain people shouldn't be allowed to vote. I probably did at some point. That's not where I'm at today. And so again, it's like I'm not coming at a place of like shaming people who believe differently, despite how strong I feel on that stance. It's like I just think that stance comes from a place of broken systems, and so I want to fix those systems.
Yeah, you'll get zero pushback from me. I'm super pro.
No, yeah.
Lower the voting age, make it easier to vote, and
sure.
Incarcerated people are still people, and they deserve to have a vote.
Mm-hmm.
So Dylan has another question or statement.
Recently, there was a major pipeline that was installed in District 35, which was vehemently opposed by residents of Texas 35 on all sides of the political spectrum. Lloyd Doggett did nothing about it. Yeah, look, the only actual legislation brought forth was an exception to the Endangered Species Act introduced by Ted Cruz to allow for the pipeline's construction. It was a sad defeat. Yeah, look, I've heard plenty of mixed opinions about Lloyd Doggett. What I hear is positive, but I've also talked to many people who have a negative view and point out specific issues. I think he probably generally is liked by the residents of Austin, but like, yes, you're pointing out a specific issue where somebody who has been in Congress for longer than I've been alive, uh, you know, is definitely being subject to some of the entrenchment and corruption that's happening in Washington D.C., which is actually like a really important thing that I thought about a lot before deciding to run, which is that like we're all human, we're not impervious to consistent and constant rhetoric of some kind. Like I totally foresee myself being in DC and having people, lobbyists in my ear all day long telling me, hey, by the way, if you change anything, then the world will stop spinning or whatever. And so I thought a lot about like, how can I counteract that in a systematic way? And so kind of the simplest thing is like I've committed to like live streaming at least once a week to remain accessible. But like, and in a very open town hall type of format, anybody can join. But also my government accountability pillar of my platform, which you go to voteforsass.com. You can read more about it if you want. But effectively, it's a citizen fueled form of government accountability. So it does not require consent from the government at all. It's funded by donations. It's effectively a social media platform with like voting on important issues weaved into your timeline effectively. So whether that is like specific bills or it is like things that your representatives do or other important issues. And then it's very public and open and transparent, open source. You'll use blockchain to record votes. And so what you'll end up getting is like public scorecards of representatives that literally give them like, this representative is only 43% representative of their district based on what their district thinks about this legislation and how they voted on this legislation or whatever it is. And so I actually want to be the guinea pig in that. I think that is like one of the advantages of me being in Congress during the development of this is that like we can test out new features, and if they go awry, I'm not going to make a big stink about it and make bad PR for it. I will still help to continue promote it. Like I'll take that hit. But like I think that this is a real way for the people to start holding representatives accountable in a way that doesn't require the consent of or participation of the government. And I can talk more about that if you want, but that's a thing that I'm building.
Yeah, I like that idea of being like accessible to your constituents. Like that should be something that's normalized. And I feel like AOC dabbles in that a little bit with her Instagram lives. And I'm like, I know that she's like everyone loves to hate her, but like, I don't know. I don't really get a lot of the criticism 99% of the time. And I think with that specific thing, whatever you think the optic is, I think she's literally making herself available when the vast majority of Congress doesn't. And that should be noted. And others should follow suit.
For sure. Yeah. And I kind of want to take it to the next level. Like I said, making the commitment to at least once a week. I had a stream set up a couple months ago. I was out of town and I thought I was going to be in my hotel by that time and I was just going to stream from my iPad. But that didn't happen. And I was in the back of an Uber and I was like, hey, do you mind turning down the radio? Because I got to stream from my phone here for a little while. I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to be there.
I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, let's talk about your platform here. You're obviously for universal health care. Mm-hmm. And you think that the pathway to that is most likely going to be Medicare for all. So you would vote yes on Medicare for all.
Yeah. It's not the only path. There are a bunch. That's what I foresee happening. But like the important thing to note is healthcare is complicated and we're not going to get it right on the first try. Like there are going to be problems. It's going to take time. It's going to take tweaking. We are so far behind. I'm in a sort of move fast, break things kind of mode. Like that needs to be our attitude. And so like there are things I would like to change about Medicare for all if I have the chance. But those are not deal breakers for me. Those aren't going to stop me from voting yes on it. I would vote yes on Bernie's or Pramila Jayapal's version as written, if it came to the floor for a vote, I would vote yes on it. Among other plans, but yeah, and I also don't want to write my own plan because it feels like everybody's got their own plan. Again, if you want to read more about like my specific opinions about some like little details, you could vote for sass.com, find it on my policy page. But yeah, universal health care, that is absolutely, we absolutely need that for sure.
And then I also noticed that you're for the legalization of marijuana, which I live in Washington State. So I'm like, every time that like there's states that are like, we got to debate this, and I'm like, you guys sound archaic. Like nothing bad will happen. Like a few more billboards will go up advertising it, but outside of that, like your city will be exactly the same. It's not like dumpster fires and just like unbelievable crime rates up or anything like that. But you also would pardon all nonviolent incarcerated people who have a marijuana related. See, I feel like I'm trying to give you the platform to talk about your platform, and I keep mansplaining your platform to yourself. But yeah,
no, you're fine. No, I love it.
Tell me. Yeah, go ahead.
You're reading it off my website, which is what I want. I put a lot. I have like 40,000 words on my website. I eventually want to have videos just going over it, and I want to like further improve accessibility on it for sure. Some pages are definitely just like a wall of text, and I don't love that. But yeah, I want to just keep going even further than that.
Yeah, so in other words, Sass, tell me how you would end the war on drugs.
Yes. So let me go all the way. Hang on, my mouse just like freaked out. So drug addiction is a disease. This has been recognized by the American Psychiatric Association. And not only is it a disease, it is a disease that can be treated, and we know how to do it. Portugal, among other countries, has demonstrated this. But if we're talking about practical steps, the first thing, decriminalize, legalize marijuana nationwide, then fully pardon everybody who's been convicted of a nonviolent drug crime. A really important thing that people don't talk about, I think it's just because people don't realize, which is kind of my whole point, is we need to create space and listen to the families who have been devastated by those unjust convictions. So that way we can begin the process of helping those families to become whole and making up for what they've lost. To keep going, we need to create robust, free rehabilitation and treatment services for anyone and everyone who would like it or needs it to help get off of addiction. So, this really needs to happen alongside the decriminalization of all illicit drugs, but it takes time to build those systems, but we can do it. Other countries have. Let me say this. That needs to happen. That needs to coincide with the decriminalization of all illicit drugs. Let me emphasize that point real quick, that we shouldn't criminalize drug use at all, because it doesn't work. And it just causes more problems. It just gets more people locked up. It hurts our economy, hurts families, and it doesn't solve addiction crises. And it also creates a black market for drug cartels. But there's one more thing to do on top of this, and then I'm going to tie it all together and why it all works. So one more thing that needs to happen is I believe that after the decriminalization of all illicit drugs, and legalization of marijuana and psychedelics like shrooms, the government needs to sell hard drugs like heroin and methamphetamines. And if we combine that with on-location access to those rehabilitation and social services, we can ensure that addicts can safely obtain and use those hard drugs without shame or punishment. And this is necessary to maximize the number of addicts who can and will voluntarily seek help. Because remember, this is a health crisis. If this seems like too much, just try to take a step back, look at the bigger picture. The goal. What is the goal? The goal is to reduce harmful drug use. That is the goal. This is how we achieve it. And then there's a really great side effect of this, which is that if the government is directly selling hard drugs, that would economically destroy the black market drug cartels in America. So when you put it all together, you're reducing government spending on incarceration and fighting drug cartels, and you're increasing revenue through the taxed sales of drugs and an increase in economic productivity just from having like a freer, healthier populace. And even if you don't tax the drugs, which there are arguments for, this approach is a solution to a variety of problems that pays for itself. So the money you save, the extra money you raise can pay for all those rehabilitation and social services. And so you don't actually need to worry about like, how do we fund it or whatever. It pays for itself. This isn't going to happen overnight, but we have all the knowledge that we need to begin the shift. So it feels like a bit of an aggressive approach, but the thing is, it works. And we've seen it work, and we can make it work, and we can do it in a way that just leads to a healthier populace that is less addicted to hard drugs, and ultimately that's also a freer populace too. So there it is. Just laid it all out.
I like it. You know, scrolling through your platform earlier, and maybe it was like the dyslexia, but I was like, you had something that initially I thought said food desserts, but it was actually food deserts, and I'd never heard that term before. And I was like, this I have to check out. So tell us about that, because I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, so food deserts. So these are geographical places where people live, where the access to quality nutritious food, affordable quality nutritious food, is low. And that tends to lead to a high consumption of fast food, foods that are very high in artificial sugars, cane sugar, and high fructose corn syrup specifically, because that's what's available. That's what they can get. This exacerbates the obesity epidemic. This exacerbates the cardiovascular disease. This makes people less productive. It makes people it hurts people's moods. Like, it has all sorts of negative effects. Like, your diet makes a big difference in your life. It affects your sleep schedules. Like, you cannot ignore that what you eat makes a difference in your health. And there are economic problems with it too. But the important thing to note is that food deserts exist both in rural areas and urban areas. So in urban areas, they're typically in minority communities that have it's been kind of systematic of like preventing that and restricting it. And then in rural communities, it's just grocery stores just can't sustain themselves on a profit-based model. And so we definitely need to take, we need to shift our thinking about it and our approach, which very much aligns with unconditional basic income, of like, food is necessary for life, and we have the abundance that we need, and we should be focusing on guaranteeing it for people. And kind of the way that I've tied this all together is there's another problem that's happening in our food supply chain, which is the takeover of factory farms. And so that is leading to lower quality food. That is leading to more animal abuse. It is leading to worse effects on our climate and our environment. You've got like the pesticide industry that's like lobbied against GMOs and started like a misinformation campaign. So we're like wasting lots of water, washing away pesticides, when we could just build it into the genetic code of all of our plants. And you've got and it's hurting local farmers, it's hurting localities, and it leads to a ton of waste. Like, it's problematic in a lot of ways. And so what I want to do all together, and so I see a way to kind of combine these two and make it all work together. It's pretty straightforward. So the federal government can fund a program that directly subsidizes grocery stores in food deserts, both rural and urban. So communities in food deserts would be able to apply directly with the Department of Agriculture. So we don't need a new department. We can just use an existing administration. This way, and then through this program, you would connect these communities with the food deserts to local farmer co-ops. So there would also be money to help farmers organize themselves into co-ops in their regions, and you would give these food deserts through this program exclusive sourcing deals with these local farmer co-ops. So that way, these grocery stores are now stocked. They're stocked with food that is grown and that is sourced locally, that is healthy, that is subsidized. So that way, those grocery stores can stay open. It gives people access to the healthy food. And the really important, like the key metric here is that healthy food needs to be at least as cheap and convenient as unhealthy food, specifically fast food. That is the key metric that you want it to go by. And so if you make the solution more convenient than the problem, then the solution will manifest itself. And so this will dramatically reduce the burden on our healthcare systems, and it'll allow more communities to thrive. And so funding for these funding for this program can just come in reductions in subsidies to factory farms, right? So we subsidize factory farming. We can reduce those subsidies, and we can put that money towards this program. Although altogether, honestly, it's on the scale of the U.S. federal government, this is not a terribly expensive program. And at the end of the day, it mostly just requires prioritization in the budget. So thinking about the pay-fors, I find this kind of convenient way to tie it all together, but really it's about priorities is what it comes down to, like I said at the beginning.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice soundbite. I like what you had to say there, and so that's why I wanted to highlight it.
Yeah.
Dylan has some questions again.
Yeah. With the expansion of the Central Texas Food Bank, farmers co-ops have begun to donate surplus crops. Would you be in favor of additional tax credits to encourage farmers to donate these crops? Yeah, I wasn't actually fully aware of that. In Travis County and Hays County in particular, the Central Texas Food Bank also partners with HEB, which is the local big grocery store chain. It's very loved by Texans. We love our HEBs, to stock their shelves. Would a tax credit be the solution there also? Yeah, for sure. It's one form of an economic incentive. So tax credits, subsidies, rebates, whatever. It's all at the end of the day. It's just where we put money. I absolutely love that. I don't think food banks. That's what Central Texas Food Bank. Food banks are not the real solution to addressing food deserts. I love food banks. I've volunteered at food banks before. The goal though is to make food banks unnecessary, but I totally get that they serve a need, and they serve a need in the moment as well. And I'm absolutely in favor of programs to help out food banks while we figure out the rest of this crap. So for sure, yeah, hard yes, I would support that. Am I yelling? I feel like I'm in a very echoey space. And so I started to talk over
I was like,
myself.
even if you were, like, you're on Mute the Media, so like, yeah, we endorse sometimes getting a little bit fired up,
That's a good
especially
point.
when you're like advocating to like deal with food insecurity. Like we don't mind. We don't mind here. I know that like your platform is huge, so I'm just trying to think what next to highlight. Oh, you're for canceling all student debt and also making it afford, like, knock out two birds with one stone.
It's two things at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So two things at the same time: cancel all public student debt, and make public colleges and universities and other secondary schools free. So we do both of those things at the same time. There are arguments for and against. I've heard people say like, "Oh, it's elitist," but it's like I've known so many servers who are broke ass and just like they could be really helped by it. Like they're not elites. Student loan debt is a huge burden. But the way that I view student loan debt is just as a leech on our economy, and I just want to be done with it. I just want to move on. I just want to wipe our hands clean, leave it in the past, just say no more. It's over. And it's interesting because like something like 90% of student loans are like federally backed by money that was basically printed in order to fund them. So you're technically removing money from the economy, although that money isn't circulating. So you're not going to have any like inflationary effects here. Is a basic, like it works. It's effectively is the short of it. Like it totally works. And it's also like insane that we charge people for education. Like, that is backwards. Like, we should be paying people to get educated. And like, you know, I have like a whole other thing about like, we need to shift our approach to education or whatever. And that's like a whole other conversation. But like, I'd at least like to break even for now. Like, can we at least just bring it to zero and stop charging people for it? That I think is ridiculous. Like, I'd rather have a more educated populace. So yeah, that's my stance on it. Like I said, it's like, I don't even want to make all the other arguments. I just want to be done with it. I just think student loans are just a tiring burden, and I just want to be done. So, and we can do it. So let's do it.
Now, we've hit that hour mark, so I was like, we can either wrap it up now, or if there were other things on your platform that you're like, oh, I really wish we had a chance to highlight that, like, we can still keep going. Like, the floor is yours for however long you want it.
I would love to keep going. Yeah.
Okay.
Were there other things that you wanted me to talk, that you noticed that interested you?
I did. You had a whole section about social media, and yes, yeah. There was a lot of interesting takes, but also I think valuable takes, because you're addressing, none of our laws are really what is the word I'm looking for? Acknowledging that the internet happened in the early 90s, and that we never really adjusted any of our accountability circumstances to address the technology advancements since then.
Yeah, so this is kind of like part of a larger narrative of like, when radio happened, there was a national conversation around like, okay, this is a big deal. Like, this is going to change the way we communicate, and we need to like think about this and like how we want to approach this. And we put some regulations in place and some laws. Some of it worked, some of it didn't, but like, at least it happened. At least it was like an attempt. That didn't happen with the internet. Like, but it's just here. It just happened. And now effectively, like, what that is, and also Congress is filled with 80-year-olds who don't know how this stuff works. Like, there's no, like, that's not to say that all 80-year-olds don't, but like, most of who's in Congress doesn't. It was so embarrassing watching them like interview Mark Zuckerberg, asking like why their campaign emails went to spam, and it was like, what are you doing? And so we absolutely need some fresh blood. I get more seniors telling me that they want to replace these old fogies with somebody young than I do from any other demographic, which is, I find ironic and hilarious. But there hasn't really been any approach. There's been no official like interpretation of the First Amendment in the context of the information age. And so what that has led to is it has forced the hand of tech companies like Facebook, like Google with YouTube, like Twitter, to interpret the First Amendment of the Constitution, which is like, nobody wants that, right? Like, that's not their job. Like, the people don't want that. These companies don't want it. It's a huge PR problem for them. Like, they'd rather just have the rules laid out and just follow those and say, if you don't like them, go talk to your representative. Like, that's how they would much prefer that, for sure. Because this is a mess for them. I mean, Facebook just is trying to rebrand itself because of how much, and it's like, we can talk about why that's happened and everything, but like, yeah, nobody's having a good time with this. So we absolutely need to have a larger conversation. And there are things that I might want to do at the congressional level about it. I will say that the First Amendment, if you read the actual text, effectively says that the government cannot take away your right to free speech. It doesn't guarantee that you'll be able to say whatever you want on somebody else's platform, which is what Facebook and Twitter is. So you are not necessarily protected there, but I do want to recognize and acknowledge that social media and the internet is how we communicate today. It is how we speak today. And we can absolutely write laws in that spirit. But I want to take this to a bigger picture. I think that there is a much broader conversation that needs to happen, and it needs to be global. So what I propose is that the United Nations recognize large digital communication platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr as digital countries with a new type of virtual sovereignty. So the UN has a list of human rights for physical countries. If we then recognize these digital countries, then the UN can create a list of rights for digital citizens in digital countries. So these now new digital countries will have to comply with additional legislation within the borders of physical countries. But some of those rights determined by the UN must be guaranteed everywhere. And then how we actually enforce that is the physical countries of the United Nations, like the United States, Canada, European Union, can leverage collective economic and legislative power to incentivize these digital countries to enforce these rights. So let me give you some examples of digital rights. Clear, consistent, and full disclosure of community rules and guidelines on each platform. So that way digital citizens can know what to expect when they join a platform. Another one could be digital citizen protections around data privacy, things like creator compensation, or even like balanced content algorithms to prevent the spread of disinformation through echo chambers. You can even have democratic provisions. You could require democratic provisions like voting rights, referendums, and multi-branch governing within these systems, so that way the digital citizens of these digital countries have some say in how they work. And there's actually, I haven't updated this, I'm very recently learning about some really cool things, DAOs, DAOs, digital autonomous organizations, and that actually has some of these features. So it's going to be really interesting as part of Web 3.0 to see how this kind of goes in with that. But the point is, I strongly feel that this needs to be a global conversation. Even though many of these platforms are based in the US, our culture and our laws should not be forced on the entire world. However, these conversations are going to require representation and representatives that live in this century and actually understand the information age, and who can have comprehensive discourse about the world online. That brings me back to my platform, as most every issue does, with things like government accountability, voting method reform, to help get the right people in. But I see the concept of digital countries as an important step of how we move forward as a society. As a freshman House representative, I certainly don't see myself being a U.S. ambassador to the UN to talk about digital countries and citizens and rights. However, I do hope that I can at least bring some modern influence to Capitol Hill.
And then I feel like there was a question.
Does that all make sense? Do you have a question on any of that? I feel like I kind of, like you said, there were some hot takes in there.
No, I was going to say, like, it makes sense to me, but I also read the page, and I encourage people to go to your website, because it's like a plethora of information, and I wish we could normalize that. I'd advise you to have maybe some bullet points for anyone who wants like easily digestible stuff, because not everyone's like a political junkie like myself. But I'm like, yeah, I don't like when people have vague platforms. I don't respect that, and that's a red flag to me. And so I really appreciate that you're trying to like really put all that out there. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned term limits, and you think across the board there should be term limits for everything. And I just want to remind voters, we are the term limits. Whether they pass them or not, we are the term limits. But
to some degree, vote splitting in elections is a real big roadblock to like practical term limits, which is why voting method reform is on my platform. And one of the things I do want to just highlight real quick, that I make a distinction between my platform and my policy stances. So most of what we've been talking about tonight is policy stances. And those are kind of B tier for me. So my A tier stuff, my platform has 4 pillars, and that's universal basic income, it's voting method reform, government accountability, and directly addressing division. And so I see those as kind of the 4 pressing issues, or the kind of the 4 big things that are about like the mechanical problems that are preventing us from addressing everything else. So like, I really care about the environment, I really care about healthcare, and I've got my stances on all of those, but like none of that, we've seen that the current approach isn't working. And the reason is because of these blocks that are happening. And so we start to address some of these blocks, then we can get to some of this other stuff. So that's just the thing I want to highlight real quick. Yeah.
No,
I
yeah,
wanted to highlight. Yeah.
yeah. I really respect that, and we've had, not to flex or anything, Sass, but we've had a few candidates on Meet the Media, and I always get to a point where like I'm like, okay, I have one. Like producer Cheyanne has like one question, and there's only one right answer, and it's I asked them if they would support universal basic income, and I didn't have to do that with you because you've brought it up like 5 times at this point.
Yeah.
So like right now you're like my favorite candidate we've had on because I'm like you get it, you get the importance of UBI. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Supreme Court reform.
Yeah.
Talk
So
to me about
so
that.
I was on another stream, and this was like right before I updated my website, and then I updated it a couple days later. I was like, go back on and do it. And so he was like a political Twitch streamer or whatever, and I went back and I watched it, and he went through it, and he like didn't understand it in part because he skipped over like half of what I said on there. But like it's like again, it's like I need to make the information more accessible. So I would love to break this down. And I'm totally going to make a clip out of this and post it up on my YouTube channel if you're okay with that. So I want to go through my stance with the Supreme Court, and this is just one idea. Like this is not the only way to do it. This is just kind of what I've gathered and put together. So currently, the Supreme Court of the United States, and we're going to call that so that's SCOTUS, and I'm going to just say SCOTUS from now on to make it faster. So the SCOTUS has 9 justices and has effectively remained at that number since the Judiciary Act of 1869. Since then, the population of the U.S. Has increased nearly tenfold, and the volume of cases that SCOTUS needs to handle has grown dramatically, and our laws, our government institutions have become just a lot bigger. They've become a lot more complex. We are way past due for an expansion of the U.S. Supreme Court. So altogether, the proposal I'm about to make is a proposal for 23 justices, but it's broken down in a very specific way. So currently, the U.S. has 11 regional circuit courts of appeal, plus the District of Columbia Circuit Court of Appeals and the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. And so this is relevant to this also affects the Federal Circuit, also affects like territories like Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, right? So altogether, that's 13 courts of appeal. So my proposal is that the goal overall with the court is to have 2 what I call associate justices, or I'm sorry, this is an official term, 2 associate justices representing each regional circuit, and then 1 chief justice who presides over the District of Columbia Circuit and the Federal Circuit. So it's 11 regional circuits plus so 11 regional circuits. Each circuit has like 2 justices that represent them, so that doubles it to 22, and then you have 1 chief justice, makes it 23, and the chief justice resides over the District of Columbia and the Federal Circuit. So mechanically, this would work by giving each president 2 associate justice appointments per Congress. So this is effectively they get 1 appointment per year. So we're definitely appointing justices way more often now. And that's associate justices. The chief justice appointment will happen whenever the seat is vacant. So the way that works, by the way, is the president suggests a candidate to be on the SCOTUS, and then the Senate holds hearings, and then if they confirm, and then they can either confirm or deny that recommendation, and then they end up being a justice, typically for life unless they step down. But so I want to adjust the way these hearings work a little bit. So hearings for new associate justice appointments would be led by the senators who represent the states in the circuit, who are going to be represented by the appointed associate justice. So I think that this would help to reduce the politicization of Supreme Court justice appointments, because you're not giving power to the Senate Majority Leader. You're giving power to like a select few senators who are like specific to that region. the circuit, how we select a circuit for a given appointment would just be whichever circuit has been represented by the fewest number of associate justices for the longest continuous time. So, and then if all circuits have, well, I'll come back around on it. So for example, if you were to have, if a circuit were to go down to one justice, but all other circuits had two, that would be the next circuit to get a justice. If you had three circuits go down to one, whichever one went down first would then go up to two. But if you had one that went down to zero, whichever one that went down to zero would be first. So you're trying to even out the number of representatives for each circuit, for each region. If all circuits have two justice representatives, of those 22, so not the chief, of those 22 associate justices, the one who is the most senior, so the one who's been on SCOTUS for the longest time, will be replaced, quote unquote, by the next appointment for their respective circuit. So you're gonna appoint a new justice for whatever circuit that justice is, the one who's been on the court for the longest, and they're being replaced by that next appointment. The Constitution prevents the removal of a justice if so long as they have demonstrated good behavior, which is the actual language in the Constitution. So we're not actually removing them from the court. What we're really doing is we're taking this very senior justice who's been there for a long time, and we're going to give them a new title. The title is just senior justice. So we can have as many senior justices as we need, but senior justices would maintain their salaries for life, but they would serve on lower courts by designation. So they're no longer serving on SCOTUS. They're serving on like federal courts or other lower courts by designation. Temporary associate justice vacancies. So if there's a vacancy, those can be temporarily filled by the senior justices who are still around until that spot is filled by appointment. So this also helps to keep that number of justices on the court up closer to 23, even when there are vacancies. If no justices ever step down or pass away or become otherwise unable to serve, the shortest effective term for an associate justice ends up being 22 years. That's how the math works out. So that's still a very long time, but that would happen before designation as a senior justice. It can happen. It can take longer, so it'll never be shorter than 22 years. They'll always be on there for at least 22 years, which is still a very long time. We could also, I think, when you look at what the regions look like, you can redistribute. I think it would be worth redistributing the states within circuits to even out the populations and the number of senators per circuit. And I've gone through and done this, and I have a note on it. It's not on my website, but I think that might be a reasonable addition. But the actual argument is as to why 23 justices or why just many more justices is that a larger court is just a lot more flexible in its duty. And you could make arguments to expand it even further than that. You could absolutely make arguments for more. You do not need the entire court to preside over every case. You can just have 7 justices look over this case and 9 justices look over that case, or whatever you want to do. So this empowers the SCOTUS to accept more cases, which then will help to normalize its role as a body that regularly settles disputes and that better evolves with our modern, ever-changing world. And this is really important because the Supreme Court, the SCOTUS, turns down way more cases than it accepts. And I'm not saying that's all for bad reason, but they would be able to accept more cases, and that's a good thing because when the Supreme Court makes a decision, that gives guidance to lower courts about certain issues and topics and different ways of interpreting things. Because the courts are all about interpreting the law, right? That's the judicial branch, and in particular the U.S. Constitution. That's the big one, and so this is the system. It is very mechanical. I'd love to have an animation on it at some point and a video going over it. I know it might have been a little bit hard to follow. I really tried to take it slow and break it down, but I'd love to let you ask me some questions about it, Shai, so I can give some clarifications.
a lot of pressure. No, I was just enjoying listening to what you were saying. And well, I always think it's like a little bit worrisome when they're like, we should adjust. What's the word I'm looking for? It always seems like whoever's in power is like, we should make this adjustment because it makes this easier for us to stay in power. I do think it's super sketchy the way they designed the Supreme Court so that people just stay in there forever. And that literally one person in the Senate, i.e. Mitch McConnell, can just make it where you don't actually get to pick when it's your turn to pick. So I don't really have pushback on how you're like advocating for reform. I just don't know how realistic it is because it's like it's such a core component of when they set up how the United States was gonna, rule.
Yeah.
That I'm like, yeah, I'm just kind of I guess I'm like you're more optimistic than myself, but I appreciate what you're discussing because it makes sense.
Yeah, there are 2 points I want to make on that. Justices used to step down a lot more often on their own. They used to say, "I've had enough. I'm good to go," and they step down, and then there's new appointments. And people also didn't live for nearly as long back in the 1780s, and so it was like, you get somebody on the court who's in their 40s, like, oh, they're going to be in there for 40 years. No, if you get somebody in the court who's in their 40s in the early 1800s, it's like, oh, they're going to be in there for 5 years. You know what I mean? And so like those were kind of the two justifications. I still don't necessarily. I mean, credit where credit is due. Of like, they did the best with what they had. It doesn't work in modern times. A constitutional amendment would be better, and that's not going to happen. In terms of like actually making it happen. Again, this is why this is a policy stance and not a platform pillar. That like, in order to get these policy stances, we got to address these platform pillars first. We're not going to get this stuff until we have better representatives in the first place. And so, if we have better representatives in the first place, this may become viable. So yeah, but I mean, that was one of the things you were getting at, which is the how. And this is the thing that I think politicians need to be asked far more often. It's like, okay, but like, how do you actually get it done? Like, what are you going to do differently? Because what we've been doing isn't working. And nobody ever asks that of politicians, or when they do, they give half-assed answers. And like, my answer to that is my platform. That's the how.
Yeah. Speaking of like your platform, how it's like different than just like, here's like where your policy stances are. The platform, when you read it, it's like kind of a narrative. And I think that helps. It's a little bit more digestible because you're going through almost like a back and forth, and you're just addressing like frequently asked questions, for example.
The UBI for sure is like that page is like I'm having a conversation, and that was what I was going to do with everything else, but I decided against that. I did it with, I think, gun reform and police reform. I think those two are kind of formatted the same too.
And the democracy reform dabbles in that kind of like, you're almost asking the questions that people already have and then like providing
the voting method reform, there are a couple of those in there too. Yeah, and I think that was just kind of more for like the longer, wonkier stuff that was more complex and had like a bigger, diverse set of like perspectives and like issues and concerns that people have. And so yeah, I definitely tried to create that narrative, especially because the Freedom Dividend page is 3,900 words, and so it's like it's a lot to get through. So having those little breaks of like, okay, but like, how do we pay for it? Like, wait, unconditionally? Wait, but how is my unhoused neighbor going to get paid or whatever? Like, and it's like, it's coming up with all these different questions, but it also allows you to skip over the sections that you're like, oh, I don't care about that part. So yeah, for sure. I definitely, again, I want to further increase accessibility on the site. Absolutely.
But yeah, overall, I think that all the 4 different platform pages are an interesting read. At one point you say, I think it's Make America Kind Again.
Make America Kind Always.
I apologize. Make America
No, you're good.
Always.
No, I know. This is good. This is a good point. I want to talk about this. I don't care whether or not you think America used to be kind or not. It's irrelevant to me. I'm saying make it kind now, make it kind going forward. Make America kind always. And so that's what I eventually want to get purple hats with green text that says MAKA, MAKA, and get people to be like, wait, what does that mean? Make America kind always. So yeah, that's I think that's a really, so that's one of the things I say. I also like to say, so that was kind of inspired by like Andrew Yang having a take on the MAGA. So it's like, but I also didn't come up with it. I stole it from somebody who lives in Houston. Her name is Neo Golka, and it was her idea. And I asked her if I could steal it, and she said yes. So I totally stole that. I also say diversity without division. That's another one I say a lot. Actually, I have it. Etched on the back of this iPad. I really like that phrase. I really do. Diversity without division. I believe diversity is our greatest strength and division is our greatest weakness in this country. I believe that we can work to preserve the former while we work to reduce the latter, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was going to say, yeah, Vaughn was on it. I was, yeah, it's the dyslexia, but yeah, I liked that messaging, and it's ironic because your district is not red leaning. So it's not even, you're not even pandering. I think you're just.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm actually being authentic and honest and sincere and like wearing Hawaiian shirts on interviews. And like I have purple and green hair and like I'm actually a human being. Oh, yeah. Wouldn't it be great to have representation that actually represents you? So yeah.
Yeah, like in other words, I'm like, your base is not the Make America Great Again people. So I'm like, that's not what you're about. You're just like, no, I just actually think kindness is underrated.
Yeah,
and we should step up our kindness game in America. So
absolutely.
No, I like that. I know it's like a no-brainer, but you're obviously for raising the minimum wage. And outside of that, I don't know that there was.
No, did you read the page?
You don't think we should raise the minimum wage?
It's not that simple. So half the country does not work for a wage. And that was before the pandemic. I'm pulling those numbers from U.S. Department of Labor, February 2020. Many folks are fighting for a $15 federal minimum wage. If we implement that in isolation, we could actually end up hurting millions of Americans who are even more vulnerable than those who can work for a wage. So this includes folks who are on fixed incomes, like seniors and people with disabilities. Even homeless people can be hurt by an isolated federal minimum wage increase. The negative effects of this would primarily be felt in rural areas where labor is a much larger percentage of costs in places that provide essential services and products like small grocery stores. If an increase in the federal minimum wage was accompanied by an increase in everyone's fixed incomes, I could probably get on board with it. I still see it problematic for those who live on minimal fixed incomes that aren't funded by the federal government, and I think it can still hurt homeless folks. But I think a far better solution is the freedom dividend, is unconditional basic income. And instead of trying to get people to beg for better treatment in exchange for labor that is demeaning or unnecessary, I look toward a future where the jobs we don't want are handled by automation and people are free to decide what to do with their time without being a slave to corporations to deserve their basic needs. This is a quote from Kairosis. Eric is I don't know if he's still running, but I stole this quote from him. Stop asking for nicer chains. Fight for freedom. I support municipalities and some states increasing their minimum wages where deemed appropriate. I do think that it is morally abhorrent to pay people anything less than a living wage for their labor. I'm focused on practical solutions that will empower people to bargain for better wages where they do want to work, especially as modern union-busting tactics have successfully reduced and prevented collective bargaining. We're seeing a rise in strikes right now. I love that. I think it's awesome. But at the end of the day, I see minimum wage as a 20th century concept and universal basic income as a 21st century concept. So it's a little bit more nuanced than am I for it or am I against it. It's in isolation, I can't support it. If we were to also double fixed incomes, I could probably get on board.
There's a lot to unpack there, man. I'm gonna like we were just talking about like how kindness is underrated. I was like, oh, Sass is gonna feel like this isn't very kind, but I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. That messaging is terrible. That messaging is garbage. In your website, I just double checked. You say essentially, I'm going to paraphrase. If you increase, basically what you're trying to say is people who will get pushed out of a certain income bracket that's like supporting them based on what government assistance they're qualifying for, and then pushing them out of that so that they'll end up with less as a lump sum. That's problematic. Is that what you're trying to describe?
No. What I'm saying is that in a rural area where labor is 30% of the cost for a corner grocery store, if you double the federal minimum wage, that's going to lead to an increase in the cost of groceries. That will not hurt those who are making a minimum wage. It won't. That will be offset for sure by the wage increase. But for seniors who are scraping by on a fixed income, that could end up hurting them
because you're saying it'll raise the prices of everything. Okay, so now
okay.
I'm following.
I can make that clear on my site then. I appreciate that input.
Now I'm following you.
I should give that specific example on there. You're right. I should.
Yeah, because I was like I'm lost. I'm like like I said, you will lose people in the debate that is raise the minimum wage or implement UBI. I think that's a garbage debate. I fight for both. Like it's obscene that, and whether or not, I didn't say double the wage. I said raise the wage. And so if there's like a way they raise the wage so that it at least starts going up. It hasn't gone up since 2009. Like, what are we even doing, America? But the cost of living has gone up every year since 2009. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just worker exploitation. It's just human exploitation that it's not going up. So yeah, very pro raise the wage. And if you take a stance on I'm not pro regulating so that employers have to raise the wage, you will lose so many people. Even when you're like, but I am for basic income, that will literally just vilify basic income, and you will lose people because.
So like, I get the both and argument, but like, again, this is why the first thing I said is half the country does not work for a wage. Like, you are leaving behind half the country. Like you said, it's worker exploitation, yes, but you want to know what human exploitation is? Hurting the most vulnerable people. And when you think about the mechanics of raising the federal minimum wage in isolation significantly, which is like $7.25 to $15, even if that's not overnight, if it's over 3 years or whatever it is, like that can hurt some really vulnerable people. And if you talk to, I've talked to a lot of people who are on disability or who are on fixed incomes, who are like, who have praised me for that messaging of like, yes, the working class rhetoric is super ableist, and it is very frustrating that it further tries to entrench this idea that we need to be reliant on these able-bodied people. I think that is like, I really like, I want to move past this idea that we need to sell our bodies, or that we have to like deserve basic needs by working in this very narrow slice of what is labor, when like there's a much broader scope of what work can be. Like, it's on these bigger ideals that we talk about with UBI. Like, the messaging is hard. I've never heard anybody deliver this before, so like I'm still tweaking it, and I appreciate your input, and I definitely want to go back in now and take another pass at it. But like, I am serious about this stance that like I refuse to leave the most vulnerable people behind in an attempt to like raise up others, which it will do. Like I don't disagree. I think raising the minimum wage will help a lot of people, but I'm not going to leave others behind in order to do that. And that also promotes this labor ableism in our country that we need to move beyond. So and again, it's like that's why I said, like, look, if a city wants to raise the minimum wage, I think that actually makes a lot of sense. You see a lot less of this issue. Labor is a much lower percentage of costs. It's much more sensible at the city level. But like like I said, in rural areas, this could potentially be a really tough pill to swallow for those who are on fixed incomes, because the effects are going to look different.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've never heard that argument before. So like I'm just like absorbing that information. And also, Sass, not to make excuses for being a jerk, like I'm just a very blunt person. I'm very direct.
No, I love
I'm
it.
very direct. And that's why I was like, oh no, man, like I really like you, but like that messaging is garbage.
I appreciate that. It's been tough to come up with the messaging for this. This is a really hard concept to get by.
And like the new part of the nuance is, I'm curious, is it like, let's say universal basic income is implemented. Do you still take the exact same stance on raising the wage? No, then
if UBI is implemented, go for it. Raise the minimum wage. That's fine. I would support that then. But UBI first. And that's, I guess, another good thing that I should put on the site. I've said it before, but it should be on that page as well. That it's about this concept of raising the federal minimum wage in isolation. That very specific way of doing it is problematic. There are like other conditions that, like, if met, then I could support it. Like if it's combined with other things, if it comes after UBI, if it's combined with raising fixed incomes, or if we magically solve all these other problems of providing people with basic needs in some way other than a basic income, like cool, fine. And like we expand what work means or whatever. Like there are other conditions in which there are other ways to do it in which I would support it. But an isolated federal minimum wage increase of $15 an hour, I do not support specifically that. So this is giving me new ideas about how to approach it and how to maybe put that caveat in the middle instead of at the top. That might be a better way to approach it. So I appreciate the input.
Yeah, because I was going to say, not enough people talk about the workism language that is just ingrained in everything, like even within progressives. Yeah. Like I love Sunrise Movement. I think they're going to save the planet. I have like zero pushback on what they're doing, but their tagline is green jobs for all. And I'm like, oh, I'm all for green infrastructure. I'm like, yes, bring on the green infrastructure. But we're missing a huge chunk of the population that doesn't have traditional employment, and their value is no less than those who have traditional employment.
Yeah, you're missing half.
Yeah, and so I'm not okay with us perpetuating the workism language. So I like that you not only are aware of it and that you don't want to be a part of it, but yeah, that would be my take there. Is like, yeah, that page needs, the messaging has to be very clear, because if it's something as simple as like, do you support a $50 minimum wage? And then it's like, this candidate checked no, and the others checked yes, with no nuance. I'm like, yeah, that's bad messaging.
Yeah.
So, but.
Yeah, I support a $15 minimum wage. Like that in general, I do support, but it's about this specific thing that people are fighting for that I see problems with. Cool. Was there anything else that stuck out to you?
No, I mean, I was like, you had more on your site. Like I said, it is a thorough site, but that was the last thing, because I was just like, oh yeah, and that's a really positive thing to include. And I'm glad we discussed it, because I think it's relevant to discuss. There's nuance to people's policies. Mm-hmm. And I hope we all learned something with that. If you double the minimum wage overnight, you're going to directly, without being aware of it, affect people who aren't receiving the minimum wage, and you're adversely affecting them. And I'm like, that's fascinating and heartbreaking, and we need to acknowledge that so that there is something in place. Because the entire disability benefits, for example, system broken. It's beyond broken. And if I wasn't fighting for, like, if they implement, like the day they implement universal basic income, I'm going to start advocating that we tear that down, completely redo it, and we don't condemn people to being impoverished for their entire life.
Mm-hmm. That's what it does. Yeah. It requires you, if you want those benefits, you are required to be impoverished. That is a requirement for those benefits. That is, I think, the most. I never thought about it like that. I've always thought about, like, what's a concise way to say this? That is it. Disability benefits in the United States require you to be impoverished. That is a really good way to put that.
Yeah, and it's a subtle way of saying, like, we as a society, we devalue you.
Yes.
Yeah. Like we talk a big game about, like, first of all, language where we talk about, like, the most vulnerable. I'm like, you got to be really careful with, like, not having, like, a savior complex, because everyone has intrinsic value. Everyone is a productive member to society. I don't care if it's just like a baby makes you smile and it, like, brightens your mental health in that 1 second. Like, everyone plays some part in contribution, and we equate so much of, like, are you productive, whether or not you're performing labor, and we're evolving past that. Like, the robots are coming, and like, what we do for a living should not define us and not be how we value ourselves. And you get and you get that. So, like, that's why I'm just like, I don't mean to come at you with that messaging error, but I'm like, you're better than this, Sass.
I love it. Yeah, and that was, like I said, that was a hard one, because nobody has ever, like, I figured that out one time. I was just, like, pacing around my apartment. I was like, oh my God, this is problematic. And so I appreciate this conversation. I'm definitely going to review this and use it to help me rewrite that. And one other thing, labor is for machines, life is for people. That is the point.
I like that. I'm going to just highlight some of the questions that went on while you and I were, like, having our back and forth. So Vaughn said, what policy does Sass have that will reduce the political polarization of the country?
Yeah, so this is about my directly addressing division pillar of my platform. So there's some things I want to do within government, some things I want to do outside of government. But in short, the short answer is journalism vouchers. So we give every American $120 a year that they can only spend on subscription journalism. That'll go a really long way to helping get people away from these centralized media narratives, and allow people and helping to fuel local journalism and get people to learn more about what's happening in their communities, and remove the profit motive from media, which is, like, a huge reason why media is so aggressive and angering. The kind of the longer answer is, let me, oh gosh, we're almost out of water. I have been yelling. So as I said before, I believe diversity is our greatest strength and division is our greatest weakness. I believe we can preserve the former while working to eliminate the latter, working to eliminate division, which is crippling our country. And nobody, I don't think, is, like, actually addressing it. People are kind of pretending. Andrew Yang is starting to a little bit, and I'm super glad about that. But until we address it, there's not going to be any progress. And I actually think that this is going to be, I think this is the hardest challenge in the campaign, among the other things, because it's softer. So our media, from Fox to Facebook, is not incentivized to spread information. They're incentivized to make money. And these media companies have found that the best way to make money is to spread misinformation and lies and propaganda to divide people into echo chambers by getting us angry at each other. This glues us to our screens and gets more eyes on ads, right? We have a term for this, doom scrolling. My legislative idea to address this issue is I want to clearly define what counts as press. So let's briefly put this in the context of the First Amendment. I believe in the freedom of speech for individuals. I believe in freedom of the press. However, when I think of freedom of the press, I think of freedom of information, not freedom of misinformation. Now, there is no algorithm for truth. But if we can separate off the interpretation and the political commentary and the entertainment into these other categories, and then we can apply fairness doctrine to it. So fairness doctrine is about giving equal amounts of time to opposing points of view on air. We have historical precedents for it, and it is absolutely possible for us to bring it back. So we do that to all that stuff. We come back to the press side of the issue, and we can work to decouple press from the profit motive. I have several ideas on how to work toward this. Like I said, the kind of first and foremost is those journalism vouchers I just mentioned. I love that. I see that as, in mass, Americans don't like the trend of current media. So I really do see the vast majority of this money going toward quality independent sources. But there are other approaches. So, for example, we could provide low conditionality funding for investigative, local, and independent journalism. So as an example, independent journalists would have the option of applying for certification that they are, in fact, a journalist and that they are trained to detect and avoid bias in their practice. They would then receive a salary and a budget from the government to perform local or investigative journalism. The catch is that when these journalists publish their work, they would not be allowed to make any money from it. So that way their work will not be tainted by corporate sponsors. So this program would in no way affect independent journalists who are not receiving government funds. And there does absolutely need to be further conversation about the nature of this program, including what the certification process looks like and the accountability measures, which I think should be kind of more derived from journalists themselves, and it requires an input from a diverse range of journalists. But you could also have another way you could have the federal government provide matching funds to municipalities that choose to invest in local journalism. There would be many effects from these different programs, but primarily, as I said earlier, it would lead to a decentralization of sources and of narratives. So Americans would have more ways to discover information about their communities without having to focus on the centralized media narratives, as I said. All of these different categories would require full disclosure at the beginning of each article or each show. So, for example, a television channel could run a political commentary show 1 hour and a news show the next, but which category each fits into must be clearly stated at the beginning and then shown on screen throughout each program. Journalists with a government salary would be required to clearly disclose such payment at the top of each article. I don't see all of this as a full solution to the issue of division, but I do believe that empowering people to make more informed choices about the content that they're consuming can help to mitigate some of the problem of people internalizing commentary as truth. So like I said earlier, I also have ideas. I have an idea outside of government. This one has proven to be difficult to pull off, but throughout and beyond my campaign, I want to host weekly live streams where I bring on someone who disagrees with me, and then we'll just talk. People are they're sick of the screaming matches on cable, right? The viewership has just plummeted across all news media. I believe they're craving this because people want to remember what it's like to have a conversation with someone they disagree with, right? No one likes losing friends and family over stupid identity politics and labels and terminology we don't even agree on the definition of anymore. I'm fed up with people saying we need to come together while then turning around and driving more division. I want to demonstrate it. I want to actually show how to have these conversations. And I think that demonstration is really important. But if I accomplish nothing else, I hope to start a snowball effect of relentless patience and kindness for our fellow Americans, because we must make America kind always.
And then Dylan asked this actually significantly earlier, but I just never got a chance. It wasn't relevant every time that we were pivoting to something new. But
yeah, he says, what communities have you currently done outreach in within Texas 35, and what other activism have you done within the district? Yeah, so these lines, this is all figured out less than a month ago. So still pretty fresh, figuring out like what my district is. And I mean, I've definitely like been making phone calls and stuff. Been doing that for a year now. But definitely trying to drill down and figure out exactly like the best approach and gather volunteers, and start doing door knocking and better targeting who I'm calling. And it's just kind of the I mean, it's campaigning. What other activism have I done within the district? So yeah, the 2020, September of 2020, I did a basic income kind of like street art project that was really cool. I did that at the same time as the basic income march. If you go on my website, if you go on the Freedom Dividend under the platform, if you scroll down almost all the way, you'll actually see some of the fruits of that labor. So I basically, I would take a poster and I write at the top, if you received a check for $2,000 today, what would you do with that money? And I did a tabling event where I would just flag down passersby, and then they would pick up a marker and they write down their answer. And it was super cool getting to see all that. And I had direct engagement with probably about 100 people that day, just talking about unconditional basic income. And it went really well. I gave a presentation about it. The North American Basic Income Guarantee Congress, the 19th annual one. I did that with Stacy, who is the director or the CEO or whatever of Income Movement, the organization, as well as somebody else from that Congress. And we went over it. I gave a presentation on it. I wrote a guide on it so other people can replicate it. I've done my fair share of marches, whether we're talking about Black Lives or women's rights, or what was the other one? Medicare for all, healthcare, like Medicaid expansion, all that stuff. Is interesting because I was hitting the pavement for a while, and I kind of stopped because it didn't. I found that it wasn't the best use of my time. Actually, I was really trying to push a narrative of like unity and like positivity and working together to get the things that we want to get done, and it just kept being overshadowed by this kind of mob mentality and like this, these just very divisive political messages and like a lot of anger at the other side. And it didn't feel productive to me. And so like, there's nothing against marching. Like, it's your First Amendment right. March your heart out. Absolutely. But I found it not to be very useful to go just scream at the police precinct for 3 hours. I didn't think it was doing anything. And I kind of shifted into my campaign. But quite interestingly, the first like real march I was ever a part of for Black Lives Matter, I witnessed the shooting of Garrett Foster. So that was July of 2020. And then it kind of ended up being, I want to say the poster boy, but I did a lot of interviews about what happened in the following days and weeks. And I got this story, I got Garrett's story out there before the person who murdered him, and it was just a drive-by is what it was able to get his story out there. And that has actually, I think, been huge in getting people to know what really actually happened, and help to reduce the muddiness in the waters. And especially, I think it has helped in the court litigations, because Daniel Perry, who is the murderer, is being dealt his justice, with a lot of support from the community. And I think that, so like that was like a big thing for me. There's always more I want to do. Of course, COVID like has made things difficult. I've done other forms of volunteering. Like I remember volunteering with Sunrise Movement at a local church on Thanksgiving, for like, they did this whole big meal thing for homeless folks, which was super cool. A variety of other little things here and there. I can't think of them all right now. But I want to do more. I want to keep doing more. I haven't done anything big scale yet because I just don't have that kind of name recognition at the time, at the moment. I remember volunteering with Austin Mutual Aid during the Texas freeze to like deliver water to communities who had their water shut off. Well, my community was shut off too. So we helped get water to my community too. And we like got food delivered around, and like that was a whole thing. So yeah, I mean, I advocate where I can. I do what I can where I can. I haven't had the ability to organize anything big on my own yet. But that doesn't mean that doesn't preclude me from doing it in the future. So definitely want to be involved at the community level for sure.
That was a thorough answer. I think a lot of your answers are thorough, and I respect that. Like the editor inside of me, I was like, oh, that's going to be interesting to like how to condense. But you know, TC, I'm sure you know who TC is.
Yes, I know TC very well.
I bet you he'll cut up some stuff for you, because he does our timestamps. He does our timestamps on Mute the Media. So and on his Facebook, we'll put up clips that he creates, and I know he's a big fan of yours. So
yeah, he's made about 200 clips for me. We've kind of gone on pause recently, but I'd love to help reorganize. Part of that was like my own fault. There were technical issues, and I was trying to help him with it, but it was just like bad timing. But for sure, yeah, love TC. TC's great.
Yeah, and if he cuts up anything for us, I'll pass it on to you.
Sweet, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's nearly 10 and Central Time, the Central Time Zone, and after doing schedules for streams for the last 6 months for Mute the Media, I get it now. Sass, time zones are the worst. I'm all for abolishing them. I see the value in your argument.
Yes. You're on board. I love it. One more convinced.
Yes. But yeah, no, this was awesome. I really appreciate you dedicating the time to talk to me, because like I said, it was an interesting conversation, and you do have a lot of, not very many hot takes, but a lot of really good takes on how you would approach policy. I like that your platform is like simple and geared around eradicating poverty, which is like my number one passion. So yeah, I wish you luck in your race. And March 1st, you said, was the runoff.
There's the primary. May 7th is the runoff.
And May 7th is the runoff. Yeah. So like that's right around the corner, folks. So
yeah. Oh my God. It was like, oh, that's in 4 months. I've been campaigning for a year.
Yeah. Last time I talked to you, you didn't even have a district.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, things are moving
definitely fast. We definitely need donations right now, for sure, because we got to get on the ballot and like launch some stuff. So voteforsass.com, whatever you got, $5, $500, either one. I'm good with it both. So please, that would be amazing. But yeah, we definitely want to make some real things happen. And I will say one more thing, which is that, like, look, only one person's going to win. Like, I understand the math. I'm going to do everything I can to win. I'm running to win. But if I lose, I'm not abandoning this. I've learned so much. I have put together so much. I think this platform is cohesive. I think it is replicatable. And I think it is applicable, and that more people should understand it and have this better understanding of like the mechanical blockades. And so I'm going to continue to advocate. I do have a Patreon that is on Crowdfund basic income now, and that's mostly around voting method reform. I've been making these cool videos. I just today posted a kind of a draft script, and so that's just for my personal account, so I can continue to focus on this kind of cool stuff. But whatever you can contribute, whether it's to me personally or to the campaign, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's nothing else that you have to add there, Sass, I'll end the stream.
I got nothing else. Voteforsass.com. That's the hub. That's the central hub. You can get to everything from there. Thank you so much for having me on again, Chai. This has been fantastic. Or wait, I came on when you guys were like hanging out. I know you came on mine to talk about
yeah. So before you were on the Resist for Humanity stream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, this is the Mute the Media stream where I have the official title of producer Cheyanne.
Cheyanne.
Yeah, it was just a nickname over at the Resist for Humanity stream. But
gotcha. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed this, and thank you everyone for watching. And remember to mute the media.